Welcome to America's #1 Cincinnati-based museum podcast. Meanwhile, at the museum, the show that takes you behind the scenes of Cincinnati Museum Center and beyond. Over there on the ones and twos, as always, we have our producer, Magic Mitch Seifert.
Hey.
I'm your host, Cody Hefner. Today, we're joined by the director of the Richard and Lucile Durrell Edge of Appalachia Preserve System, Chris Bedel. I got the full title of the Edge, right?
You got it right. It's a mouthful.
You often just hear it as the Edge, but it does have the official title. And 20,000 acres? Is that correct? Is that what we're up to?
21,000 acres.
21,000. Okay.
Yep.
So, for those who aren't familiar with the Edge, how would you describe that to them?
The Edge is, I guess, primarily a forested system, but it's right on the flanks of the edge, literally. That's where the name comes from, the edge of the Appalachian escarpment. Really, the Alleghenies, if you will, are the last sort of province of the Appalachians before that kind of ends, and we're right at that edge. And so it's sort of a steep step in the land, very forested. We also have prairie, which is sort of a rare, plant system anywhere these days in the United States. So it's a unique system.
This is all protected land, protected space, right? It is.
It's protected, but so our 21,000 acres are, sort of interspersed amongst, private holdings. And, of course, the Nature Conservancy is our partner out there. They do more of the land acquisition. So they're actively trying to acquire some land and build a land bridge to Shawnee State Forest, which is like 64,000 acres. So between the Edge at 21 and Shawnee, you're talking 80,000 acres plus of basically forested land, and all the land in between is, private ownership. So, and then it's all pretty well forested as well. So it's really one of the last great places in Ohio for forested landscapes.
I mean, basically as wild as, as untouched as about anything that you'll find in Ohio, right?
It is. We call it a nature preserve. I kind of prefer to call it a nature sanctuary.
That's great.
Because, right? I mean, it's what it's there for. It was just set aside for the life that lives there, right? We get some humans in there, here and there, but let's just say humans aren't always the best thing for sanctuaries of natural quality such as the Edge, but we get them in there too. So we mix and match.
That makes you a nature savior, right? So Chris the savior. We'll put in a formal petition to change your job title. I think Mitch has some pull. He can figure that out.
I'll see what I can do.
You title the episode so we can.
I do.
Chris Bedel, Nature Savior.
Nature Savior. I like that. There you go.
This is, what is it, 90 minutes from downtown Cincinnati or 60 minutes?
90-minute drive,
yeah. So you just kind of shoot straight east. I've been there a few times. It's incredible. It is expansive. What's your background and what got you out to the Edge? And how long have you been here?
Actually, this is my 40th year with the museum.
Really?
In September. It will be my 40-year anniversary, believe it or not.
Gosh.
And once Dave Dzinski leaves, I believe I may be the longest-serving employee. They're sizing me up for the car right now and trying to, make sure that's right when the 40th anniversary comes around. But no, it's amazing. I basically went to art school, and a teacher there worked closely with our exhibits department head, Sandy Toombs at the time.
Sandy she is when you
legend.
talk about family trees and stuff like that, and in sports you always have these coaching family trees. I mean, Sandy is the root of this tree. The number of people who pop out and the number of times she pops up.
Yeah.
And I did not know her name was Sandy Toombs.
Yeah.
So we recently moved the mammoths that used to be at Gilbert Avenue. Then we're by our Collection Center now, or at our new collections facility. And everyone's saying, what's the backstory in this? And people like Glenn Storrs, Dave Dzinski, Dave Might, they're like, I think this. And I said, well, I have a picture of Jay Bader and Sandra Toombs working on it. And Glenn goes, Sandra Toombs is Sandy Shipley now. And I go, oh my God, of course she would know.
Yeah.
And there she is working on sculpting these mammoths. It's like anything people love about Cincinnati Museum Center, any person people love at Cincinnati Museum Center has a direct connection to Sandy Shipley.
Yeah, no Sandy Shipley, no Chris Bedel at the Edge. Let's just put it that way.
There we go.
She had faith in me because, I was an art student at the time, and basically that person was leaving the special exhibit position, and that person was also a art student from the same college. And so the call was out like, hey, do you have somebody else? And like, hey, this Chris Bedel guy. And So I went and interviewed, and I think she then called the teacher back and like, Are you sure? He doesn't really know anything, right?
You sent me the wrong person.
Right. So I was taken by faith that, it would work, and it was amazing. I mean, my life with the museum has been just so incredible. I've got to do the most amazing things in the exhibit world, and then so 7+ years of that, and then going out to the edge for the balance. So I've been out the edge now 32 years.
Wow.
So both sides of the fence, if you will, have been amazing. The exhibit stuff, I mean, getting to work with curators, digging up, bison and, salvaging skeletons, and, driving to Michigan and casting, chestnut trees for the Weakening Web exhibit that was a traveling exhibit. And, I got to go to the Philippines on an expedition with Bob Kennedy and climbed to the top of some remote island with people with machetes, hatcheting away ahead. And I mean, this is like dream life stuff, Cody. I mean, this is
what were you doing in the
life.
Philippines?
I basically at that time was in exhibits, and the museum was thinking of developing an exhibit on like temperate rainforest. So that particular area of Philippines was that. And I think Bob needed just some hands too. I mean, you're living in this remote jungle, doing collecting and various things that we were doing. So
did you volunteer, or did he say,
I was all over
yeah.
it, I was all over it. Like, are you kidding me? I get to go to the Philippines, like tree ferns, and like, oh my gosh, it was incredible living out in the jungle with folks who were there, caring for, our needs, so to speak. But still, it was very remote, lots of rain, lots of leeches, that kind of thing. It was high adventure, man.
Were you picking leeches off yourself?
Oh yeah.
It's good for the humors, right?
You know what? It's funny. I learned at that point, like, just how small. I mean, like, so he would take us, in the downtown in Manila or wherever we were. I'm like, I'm like a giant, right? I'm an ocean of people that are like 5 foot tall. I'm like, Bob, I'm kind of standing out here. You know what I'm saying? Like,
just blend in, Chris.
Just blend in, Chris.
Just be normal.
It was awesome, though, just to live that culture and riding their little jitney taxi-like things. I mean, it was incredible. Bob Kennedy was an amazing person who we lost just recently.
That's another name that comes up. I think Bob Genheimer has spoken about him before, and Glenn's spoken about him before. It's amazing to hear these names kind of recur, and you think of. Sometimes I like to think of the staff and the team here at the Museum Center as these classes that come in, and we've already talked about Sandy Shipley and kind of the Sandy Shipley class, and you've got the Bob Kennedy class, and DeVere Burt will come up and others like that. So
yeah.
Mitch, you had a Philippines question.
Was that the expedition that discovered the Panay striped babbler?
I believe it was the one right before that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were the team before that, and basically down there, I think there was a lot of corruption, if you will, and logging was kind of harnessed by the people running the corruption, and so these remote like mountain areas were being like logged and lost. So we were working with the Philippine government to like basically document this stuff before it was lost. Wow. So that was kind of the thrust of it. So it was a partnership with the Philippine Museum and our museum.
So you were an art student. Were you a nature kid at birth? Have you always loved the outdoors, spent time in the outdoors? And
yeah, that is the weird thing about my life is like, I was always innately into nature, right? I mean, my father was from like Oldenburg, Indiana, Batesville. So we ended up out in the forest all the time, sitting out in the woods before the light came up. And I mean, it just always tripped my trigger, and I got basically, which I would have went into that in college, but I got a full ride for art. I got a for free ride to Xavier to go to pursue art. So that threw me into that, and then this job opens up with the museum, and I'm like, oh my Lord! I mean, this is both of my things, both of my interests in one sitting, and it was unbelievable.
What kind of art were you doing?
Mixed media, drawing kind of thing. I did a lot of that kind of mixed media stuff.
Do you still draw, or do you find yourself at the edge, kind of on the trails, sketching?
I don't as much, only because my wife was working full time and spending a lot of time in Cincinnati, and then we had our son, and then so it was me and the son kind of thing,
right.
Raising him and going out in the streams and just having fun kind of thing, and then she'd come home on the weekend. So it just wasn't, and I was an art student, so I was learning a lot the ways of the forest, so to speak, and and boning up on all that. So I've had 32 years on the ground out there. There's no other replacement for being and living in the forest every day and seeing this amazing diversity of life.
With so many years in the forest and on the grounds, you said, have you counted how many pairs of boots you've gone through?
I go through a lot.
Do you have? Is your closet like a cartoon closet where
Yes.
it's a lot of the same shirts, it's same shirt, same pants, same boots, and you have 18 pairs?
I even have the old boots, with the glue-on soles that have fallen off, and I think someday they'll perfect that, gluing those back on. So I still have them. Why? I don't know, but I do. So they're all manner. They could be an exhibit all into themselves.
We should do it. I mean, a 40-year retrospective on Chris Bedel.
No.
4 decades of boots.
I've come a long way in the boot department and learned that good boots are a real thing.
From an art perspective, that could be a great hit, right?
Oh, exactly. It's true. It is true.
What are your recommendations for a good boot for someone who's out on the trails?
Definitely the sew-on soles. Don't go with any of that glue-on stuff. All the modern boots they glue them on, and then once that glue starts failing, water gets in and they fall off, and you're done. That's it. You got to throw them away. The leather's in good shape, but the boot is now useless. So you get the sew-on kind, then you can, they can actually unsew and sew you a new sole on. And you take care of the leather, they'll last, forever. So
I remember my grandpa always had, he was a big Red Wing boot guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he would just take it to a cobbler, right?
Cobbler,
shoe.
Yeah.
Cobblers and elves, those are the ones who work on shoes. And he would just take them in and just kind of get the same pair of boots.
Yeah, and they'd resole them.
Resole them because
Right.
the sole, you're not breaking in the sole, you're breaking in everything else. And once you've got that broken in,
Yeah.
you don't want to have to start over.
No. So that's what I've learned long term. Get the sew-on kind.
When you get new boots, are you wearing them around the house to try to break them in before you take
Much
them out?
to my wife's chagrin, that is true. Because as soon as you step outside, right, it's gravel and dirt and dust,
and you're on it. Have you ever gotten a flat tire on the trail? Have you ever blown a sole?
No, only
That's
on
good.
trips in Alaska where my whole the glue-on blew off, right? You're in the middle of nowhere.
The worst possible scenario.
That was, I think, the change of tide when I'm like, okay, no more glue-on boots.
What'd you do?
I got out the trusty duct tape, duct taped it on.
That's great. So there's 21,000 acres. How many miles of hiking trails are there at the edge?
There's one that we just recently are involved in. It's called the Buckeye Trail. And we don't necessarily manage it, but it crosses our property, and that's 15 miles alone. It goes from the edge over to Shawnee. So that's a good one. And then we have, upwards of 12 to 14 miles of our own trail. Cedar Falls, Buzzard Roost Rock's our most, everybody knows about Buzzard Roost Rock. It's our iconic hike everybody does. You have a beautiful view of the Brush Creek Valley, nearly panoramic kind of situation. It's beautiful.
It is. For those who have not seen Buzzard Roost, I will give you the worst description ever. If you're looking for a place to do the Titanic I'm flying, at the bow of the ship, that's Buzzard Roost, where it's this rock, this promontory that comes out, and you're sort of standing up on the edge above, the entire valley around you. It's incredible. I mean, mid-October, that's peak photo op, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you wonder what Chris Bedel does, out there, you can look at the decking and the walkway that was built out there in the winter, in the dead of winter, hauling all the lumber in by hand, concrete, the whole deal, the whole team packing all this in and building this thing all, pretty much for 2 months up there.
It looks great. I saw it before you did that. And I
It
saw
was
it after,
brutal.
and
The wind was just your hands are frozen, your toes are frozen. I mean, it was probably the roughest thing we've done.
And you're hauling concrete in by hand too, or wheelbarrows, or
up on the old shoulder, because you had to walk a trail to get in there. We didn't want to drive, a lot of stuff in there. And we decided, helicopters were out, so it took longer than we thought. Let's just say, and it turned out beautiful. It's keeping people off of the rock, which has a lot of, sensitive plants. We're kind of known for our prairie, which is a globally, endangered thing, So when you can walk anywhere you want, people tend to. But when you put a walkway there with a railing, people tend to stay in it. And it's worked. It's really saved the plant community up there.
I think there's a lot of moments where we look at the news or we hear stuff and we're like, man, what is going on with people? But when you see people at the edge and you see the respect for nature, like you said, if there's a pathway, people kind of stick to it. You're not patrolling it. You're not monitoring people necessarily. People kind of go out and they have this respect for the natural world around them. Is that what you see? Do you see that people kind of understand the space they're in, they're respectful of it, and it's this kind of moment to strip everything away and just get back to nature?
I would say in general, yeah, the sort of formal visitors, people that come out to hike our trails, but there's also lots of other folks that, I deal with as well. I mean, there's lots of, ATV issues and those kind of things we deal with,
Yeah.
Feral hogs have been a problem.
Really?
Yeah, so working with USDA to trap feral hogs and get those off the landscape, and that's been real successful. And you just never know. Who would have thought, to be a 323-pound giant boar hog right behind the chalet? Like, wow.
Oh my gosh. What's the wildlife like at the edge? Are there bears out there?
Bears move in and around. They, whether they're not breeding, we're actually working with the state. We've agreed to have them try to trap bear on the preserve and then collar them. They want to see what are their routes and things in southern Ohio. They haven't had luck yet with actually getting one and collaring one. So like I said, they'll swim the river and their territories are so huge. So They'll come from Kentucky and swim across and spend some time at the edge and then swim back. And so they're in and out. We don't know of hey, I'll take you to a den site or anything of that nature. They're not prevalent yet. Bobcat is really made a comeback. Those are common now. Pretty much see bobcat all the time.
I'm not a scientist. Have you tried jars of honey? My childhood has told me that jars of honey may
actually
attract the bears.
The state you take honey and you burn it in a pan up on a hill, and that apparently travels the farthest. Yeah, and it brings the bears in. You got to burn the honey though.
It's like the cartoons where the pies are on the windowsill and the scent kind of grabs them and pulls them in.
It pulls them in, and they'll come into an area, and then they'll put up this trap and try to trap them. And
that's amazing.
So that's kind of a new thing. We haven't really had the success with them yet, but there was an amazing footage behind our Revachol Chalet of this huge black bear charging the camera. I'm like, holy cow! Just until you see something like that on camera, oh man, that thing is really around here. Wow.
Well, what are the tips, or what do people need to be mindful of? Because this is not. I think a lot of people have been to Hamilton County, Cincinnati parks, things like that, and the wildlife and what you're experiencing there is a little different than what you're experiencing on the edge. What are the tips for people who are either first timers out there, and what to prepare for, or how to be mindful of their surroundings?
Yeah, I think those kind of things I describe, or other things that could potentially harm people, like timber rattlesnakes we have at the preserve. We have copperheads. Those kind of venomous things that. Those are you'll never see them, right? I mean, they hide. Bear ain't gonna be around. People are afraid of coyotes. You'll never see them. I mean, you'll never see bobcat unless you're putting up game cameras or out early in the morning. And so those kind of things, if you see one, you're extremely lucky. Probably the biggest threat at the edge and really in all of the the eastern U.S. at this point is ticks.
Yeah, ticks
are the biggest issue. So if you're going out anywhere, not just to the edge, but anywhere in Cincinnati, you want to wear things that protect you from ticks. I get my clothes professionally treated. Insect Shield treats them and keeps the tick off me. Or you can buy picaridin spray, which is it's a repellent that keeps them off your pants and things. So going out there with some kind of DEET doesn't work. Family-friendly stuff doesn't work. You got to use the real stuff just to keep ticks off. I know more people that get ticks in Cincinnati and have issues at the edge. So it's a universal thing,
Have you seen ticks have gotten worse?
Oh yeah,
more recently. And do you think is that?
Well, we've always had the dog tick. Long since I grew up, the dog tick's a pretty good sized tick, and they'll get in your hair, kind of thing. But the deer tick and the Lone Star tick are fairly new at the edge, probably in the last 7 years.
Really?
So the Lone Star moved up from the south, and the deer tick moved in from the east, and then they all have larvae that get on people, where the dog tick their larvae don't get on people. So you don't have to worry about it. But these other two have these little minute ticks that can get on you and can cause you issues. So it's a different game now that we have these two species.
So anyone who's listened to this episode while they're hiking or while they're outside, I'm sure is starting to to itch a little
I
bit.
know
but
it makes you itch a little bit, but then it's like, well, worrying about getting hit by lightning in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can worry about a lot of things, and like as long as you just make common sense decisions to protect yourself.
But you
It's no
talked
big
about
deal.
bobcats and bears and coyotes, and you mentioned that you're probably not going to see them. I mean, they want to stay away from you as much as you want to stay away from them, right?
Sure.
I mean, when you size things up, humans are usually bigger than most of the animals you're going to run into,
Right.
right? But the thing that terrifies me, I was going to ask about timber rattlesnakes.
Right.
Years ago, we had a program here. It must have been a professor, someone from Ohio State or something like that was doing a program, and media reached out and they said, we want to do an interview about this timber rattlesnake program you guys are doing. I said, great, but the guys in Columbus, he's not going to be able to come down for it. And they go, we'll just send someone in. I was that someone, so I'm trying to study up on timber rattlesnakes. And fortunately, we had a snake skin in Nature's Trading Post or something. The only thing I took away from it, well, two things. One was, oh my gosh, these things are really still around here.
Yeah.
And two, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag and that cartoon from the 1700s, American Revolution, things like that. That was an eastern timber rattlesnake.
Wow.
And I had no idea, but those are still at the edge.
They're still there, and I tell you, if you would ask me what one creature have you seen to give you the most pause, and that would actually just take your breath away, and just the hair on the back of your neck stands up. I mean, there is a primordial connection to these creatures, right? I mean, if you're an indigenous person living in the woods, and there's timber rattlers around, you've had some sort of relationship with them,
Yeah.
good, bad, and otherwise, and so there's this really primeval effect that they have on you, and to see one, it takes your breath away. I mean, you're just like, I can't even believe that thing is real. I mean, they're huge. I mean, they get really fat, and they're long. They get these blackish tails, and I mean, they're the most incredible, impressive animal I've ever seen. I mean, they don't have to do anything; they just sit there.
They just sit there, yeah.
And they don't rattle. I mean, the ones where we're at, I mean, they hide in just the densest stuff, and you're not gonna you're not gonna walk through a giant place of greenbrier, which has all kinds of thorns on it. Like, people don't generally walk through that. Well, that's kind of where they hide, So they're hard to find. They don't rattle when you come near them, because if they do, they probably get killed. People don't like them, so they kill them
Right.
on sight. So they've learned to just kind of be cryptic. So you can walk right up to one, and I'll tell you, it's there, Cody, right in front of you. See it over there? And it'll take you a while to adjust, because their camouflage is unbelievable. They blend right in.
You would see me freak out. I would try to play it cool. I would freak out. I'm not ashamed to admit I am terrified of snakes. And it used to be like Ann Wegman would walk around. She'd have a little igloo cooler, a little Tupperware, and I would turn around because I knew there was a snake in there. And she knew, people started to know I was afraid of them, so they used to just walk around the hallways and walk by me with these containers with a snake in it. And I just have no interest. That's fine. They can do their thing.
Yeah.
But
again, another thing, what does Chris Bedel do out there, right? I mean, there's some researchers studying these guys that, we're kind of helping with some on the ground footwork, where they basically are trying to understand their den sites. So they crawl into a hole basically underground to overwinter, and so they get bigger, right? So that little hole, now you can't get in. What do you do? And it's long thought they've been sort of generational. If you're born there, you go to that same den site as your parent, kind of thing. And so a lot of that's being turned on end. We're trying to understand more of that. There's game cameras on these holes to see how many snakes come out. We track them to some degree with some telemetry at times to see what their range is. So Mark Saloba, who works for us, is often out, waist high and, greenbrier with the antenna tracking the snake, and you can't see them. So it's really a dicey deal, but it's work that needs to be done, because you want to protect their den sites, because those are so critical to them surviving, And when they come out, so these cameras will tell us, they'll come out in March and hide under the leaves and things, and they'll even go in really late when it's really cold. You wouldn't think a cold-blooded animal can operate. And they do. So we've learned a lot from doing that project, and that's ongoing.
Because it's a nature sanctuary. It's not about
sanctuary.
Removing these things that people think are threats. People think a venomous snake,
Right.
that's a threat. This is their home. They exist. They have a role, and they have a purpose to play in the ecosystem. And the edge is not, it's not a space for humans. It's a space where humans can
And then
can't come and
sometimes
enjoy. But
we have to intervene at times. The rattlesnake, not as much, but like we're also doing a big project on Allegheny wood rat,
Yeah.
pack rat, if you will. And one of the aspects of the job you need to come out and help us with is you go to the known sites that we have them, and you pick up raccoon scat. So you got to shove your head into some kind of crack or hole in the ground and reach in there and get all that gooey goodness out of there from the raccoons.
And you have to do that bare hand because
No.
it's all by touch, right?
And you put it in a bag and send it off to researchers. See, are there raccoon roundworm eggs in there, because that kills the rats. So we're trying to basically protect the various sites. So the state's been working with us to drop baits from helicopters to treat the raccoons, and to try to get the kill the nematode in the body of the raccoon before they shed the eggs. So there's a really big project, doing a lot of DNA with them to see like what is the depth of the DNA pool out there. So they're a state endangered thing, rattlesnake state endangered. So we do a lot of kind of weird things along those lines too. We caught all the wood rats, and so we know how many we have roughly. And
I think there's in the cave here,
Yeah.
Mitch.
Yeah.
There's a wood rat.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a reproduction, but yeah, some people may be listening. They may be thinking, rats? Why are you guys protecting
I
rats?
know.
But again, the ecosystem, it is such a delicate balance, and you've seen examples in Yellowstone, for example, where wolves are reintroduced, and it actually balances. Everyone
Right.
thrives. Everyone does better. The ecosystem's so delicately balanced that if something, like the raccoon roundworm, if that's throwing it out of whack, what are the ripple effects of that?
Exactly.
And so, some of the things you're describing, you think, why waste your time on this? Why are you thinking about this? But it's a nature sanctuary, right?
It is.
So if you're going to be a nature savior like you are,
Yeah.
this is the work you do.
I think what a lot of people don't realize too is that we're only a nature sanctuary, but we are humans' life support system. The eastern forest goes down, right? We get some kind of a country fungus that kills our oak trees. Man, we're in trouble, right? I mean, just the economy of the oak. They support more life, insect species than any tree species. I mean, that one group, if that goes down, I mean, we're all in trouble. So the eastern forest supports us all: pollination, water cycle, clean water. I mean, this is all humanity. We are tethered to it, man. Tethered directly to it. So we should understand more about it, and we should care, because if
Right.
it goes down, we're going down.
Right. There's, as we said at the top, there's not a lot of spaces like this, especially in Ohio, let alone everywhere else. So this is the place to study. This is the place to kind of, it's almost like putting your foot in the ground and protecting this space. And as you talked about, continuing to expand it. But you sort of think of, if you draw a line around the edge, everything just outside that line sort of is a little bit better because of what's coming out of the edge, and on and on and on. So if we can expand that, if we can continue to protect that, right?
We need these anchor sites, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people hear about the Great Smoky Mountains and all that, and it's like the center of biodiversity. We all hear about the Ozarks in Missouri, how incredible that is. It's like, well, the edge is of equal footing, if you will, as far as like its diversity of life and its importance. It's different than those two places. It has elements of both of them, and even things further north. I mean, we are like a meeting ground of all species that have kind of meet at their eastern, western, northern distribution limits at the edge. So it's a really unique part of the eastern forest, all to its own glory. It's on the same footing as the Smokies and the Ozarks.
I think that a lot of people in Cincinnati might not be aware that the Museum Center has this preserve that we're involved in and own and co-manage. How did that come about? Why are we in the preserve business as a museum?
Well, early in the history, so the preserve started in 1959. Nature Conservancy started that. And then 61, in the early history, the Conservancy didn't keep the lands that they purchased. They were formed to buy land and protect, life. They basically gave it to other organizations to manage. So the museum in 1961 would basically gift it land to manage. So Lynx Prairie and some of the early parcels at the edge were now under our purview, if you will. The biggest important change happened. DeVere Burt was hired. DeVere was the former director of the museum. He had the first regional job for the Nature Conservancy in 1970.
Really?
Richard Durrell was a big preserve supporter, taught at University of Cincinnati, a geologist. He got the first office for the Nature Conservancy regional manager, and that was DeVere Burt. So he bought land at the edge in the early history. He then got the museum job to run the Natural History Museum. So he brought that love of the edge because he worked on it and
Right.
knew the Nature Conservancy. So he brought that there, and really the rest was history. He protected and celebrated the preserve in ways that just really unimaginable at the time. I mean, you had to really remember the edge was, sure, the organizations were involved, but there was really like handfuls of people, George Revachol and the Helen Blacks and the folks who basically built the preserve and supported the organizations. It was really the power of a few people. The power of people, Cody, as you know, is critical. We all think we can't do anything as an individual. Well, the edge is living proof of that, man. I mean, there was only some limited peoples that really brought that place to bear and continued to shepherd it through until they passed,
To that point, this is kind of a fun question. Who's on the Mount Rushmore of the Edge? Does that make sense? Can you think of those four individuals who are just foundational?
Certainly, I'd have to collectively have the Durrells as a couple, so to speak, George Revachol was instrumental in just so much. Helen Black really maybe be the first one. Helen Black was, just dedicated her life to the edge and bringing people to the edge. If she met you in a grocery store and you expressed any interest, she'd get your number and you'd be going out tomorrow if you could, Kathy Chapman, same way. These kind of people were just instrumental in bringing people out who, had the wherewithal to help the preserve, either financially or people they knew or just general folks to come out and teach them about why this place is important. And I think to your point, Mitch, it's like, well, why has it been not as well known? It's like, well, the county hasn't exactly known as like a major tourist destination. There's not a lot of tourist, what'd you say, sort of infrastructure there, especially back in the day, So I don't think the people of Adams County necessarily were looking for outsiders to come in. You know what I mean? Community's pretty tight, and so tourism is never a big thing there. So that's kind of why I think it's kind of flown under the radar. If you go to the edge, you're going there to hike.
Right. You're not going to a weekend trip to go out to dinner.
There's more coming along the VRBOs and things like that. That's kind of popping up a bit more, but in the early days, it just wasn't a thing. As a Conservancy's early motto was quietly conserving nature. So i.e., we're buying all this land with these special things. We'll tell you about it, but maybe you shouldn't be going there, initially. That's all changed now,
Yeah, you talk about that because you've talked about the Great Smoky Mountains. I think a lot of people think of that and they think, oh, you mean like Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge? Because where you are going to one of those places, and then you're going to take a day and you're going to drive out and you're going to do a little bit of hiking or something, and then you come back. And to your point, the edge isn't built in that same infrastructure, although it's just down the road from Cincinnati. So it is this unique experience that people can have. And talking about Kathy Chapman and Helen Black and people like that, these are not professional naturalists. There's just people who have a love for the space and for the outdoors, who took that and did good with it, and they really just poured themselves into it.
How do you give people a sense of place, right? I mean, these people had this sense of place for the edge. It was an important place. I mean, Helen came out like every Thursday. Helen and Kathy generally every Thursday, we'd go out on land and hike and learn something new about the land, see the flowers that are blooming, and she and Kathy were just. That was their place, that they loved and protected. It's harder to build that with people. You either have it or you don't, in a way,
Right.
But the edge does have this ability. It's a very charismatic experience. When you go out there, you just, you love it. This fog and the cedars. It's a very unique kind of place, and it kind of gets into your soul, Cody.
And I got to recommend, if you ever get the chance, to take a tour around the edge with Chris, because he knows every animal, he knows every plant. He can tell you all these different things about the ecosystem.
I love that kind of thing. That is for sure. And for 16 years, we did advanced naturalist workshops. So I had this, again, here I am in the gravy train already, working at the edge and living on the place nonetheless, I think I'll dream up who's a world authority on liverworts, and look them up like, hey, we're doing a workshop. Would you teach? I'm like, sure. So for 16 years, 5 a year, I would dream up a topic, ticks and mosquitoes at a workshop on mosquitoes. When you dive into those topics, I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, the diversity, the beauty, the color, the communication, the pheromones they use. I mean, it's just, the natural world. The eastern forest is extremely complex. I mean, people go to South America. I mean, forget it. We don't even know half the things that live in the eastern forest generally. Fly groups and, things that are we don't know all the species that live there. Still to be discovered.
You talk about mosquitoes and liverworts and things like that, and people may say, why would I want to learn more about that? But you are proving right now that if someone is interested in something, they can make other people interested in it. I mean, when you have a passion for something and when you're really interested in something, people feed off of that because everything that you know about why it's interesting, you're just feeding that to people, and they're into it.
I always like to bring up, again, this I love David Attenborough, but his whole biophilia thing was like, we were native creatures living out in the savannas, us, ape-like folks that we are, we were living on the lands, and so we have this innate connection to the natural world, to the outside. It's baked into our DNA, So when you come across somebody who knows and loves it, that wells up in you, and they draw you into it. Other folks never run into anybody that draws it out,
Right.
So it's in all of us, but it just doesn't, you don't run into the right person. It doesn't, and me, I lucked out, right? I walked into the museum, when it was over at where Channel 9 is right now, the old museum. And now I'm working with a bunch of people who love all this nature stuff. And I was a sponge, I mean, I just I'm pinching myself every day. I still pinch myself. My leg is black and blue.
In high school, I took an environmental science class, and there was essentially a math bowl or quiz bowl, but all environmental science. And my specialty was trees. And we drove up, I think, Wood County around Bowling. It was Oak Harbor. Mitch, you've probably seen signs for it up in your neck of the woods. And I had 2 or 3 days to learn all of the trees in Ohio and what's this, what's that. And so I'm just studying. We got 8th out of 88 counties, which I thought was pretty good for not knowing. And it is one of those things where I look at a tree and I'm like, I would love to remember what that tree is. It is
I know.
It's such a silly it's that, and I would also love to know which clouds are what. Those are 2 skills I would just love to be able to.
And knowing your trees, I mean, it's helpful, right? If you go to buy a house and you see, oh my gosh, there's a silver maple right next to the house, like, well, that silver maple probably likes its feet wet. You might check your basement before you buy that house. You know what I mean? So you knowing your trees and knowing what they prefer growing in, it's helpful.
I mean, so could you go out on the edge and someone says, "What's that tree?" and you're like,
"Yeah,
bingo, that one. You just know that."
Yeah, go with the trees, go with the plants. The insects are so broad. I mean, we know a lot, and the more we learn, it's just you build on it, So after 16 years, we've become, like I said, I'm humbled by it. I mean, I just can't get over how much life there is there and how it functions. It's incredible.
Do you have a favorite season out there?
I like spring when it's all new, and that's when the height of life, right? That's where all native bees, how it has 550 native bee species, and that's when they're most prolific, when plants are coming out, and some bees are specific to certain flowers. They're oligolectic, as they call it, where they collect the pollen only from that particular plant, and they dig a hole in the ground, lay an egg on it, and their young feeds on that pollen. So they have to know when that plant is blooming. So they're underground, and they come up out of the ground, collect the pollen, provision a nest for their young, and then they pass,
That's a good question. As growing seasons shift, as climate shifts a little bit, in the fall, you'll see these maps of when foliage is supposed to peak here and there and how that's changed over the years. For bees, if growing seasons shift and stuff starts to bloom earlier, that interferes with kind of their body mechanics, and is there a threat of them missing, and what's the ripple effect of all that?
We don't really know how it all works, and then somebody was asking me, years ago when all this climate thing came up, like, how's that going to affect the edge? I was a bit hard pressed, like, well, I mean, we're kind of in the middle of the thing, we're not at an ocean edge or anything like that, but now that I see it, these extremes in weather, right, it'd be like, May something, and all the butterflies are out and about, oh, boom, 28 tonight, 28 tomorrow, kills all the guys that just all hatched out and survived all winter, So
Yeah.
those are major impacts on populations, So these real swings, are detrimental to things that have evolved over time. The timing is everything.
And we always see wildfires out west and Canada and stuff like that. That are, the season gets longer. It starts earlier. It lasts longer.
Yeah.
Everything's a handful of years ago. We had a small wildfire at the edge, right?
Yep.
And I remember getting an email about that, and I was like, "What?" And then you think, well, yeah, of course it is this wild space, and it could be sparked by anything. But I was in a kind of a museum communication professional group with people from all over the country, and we had a meeting. And I said, "I'm sorry, guys, I have to go. We have a wildfire at our nature preserve." And everyone said, "What? Aren't you guys at this museum and this museum?" I said, yeah. It's, you never know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, but these are real things that you are out there dealing with.
Yeah, you do, and you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, just 2 days ago was the hailstorm that I've never seen the likes of, hail and rain. I mean, it was like a torrential. I called it vicious. It was the most vicious storm I'd ever seen, And then the week before that, all the roads went underwater because the Ohio River backs up, and it backs up Rush Creek and floods all of our roads. So I was kind of stuck back there for the week. And so, yeah, we lose electric all the time, water all the time. It's just part of living out in the middle of nowhere,
When the apocalypse comes and we all need to fight for survival, you're the guy we want.
You want to come out
side,
there?
right?
We'll boil you up some plants and maybe have a squirrel or two on the Barbie grill.
We'll have the Chris Beadle cookbook that's coming out
There
this
you
fall.
go.
I think we're putting the finishing touches on it. When you're out there, what's in your backpack? What are you taking with you? What do you always have on you when you're out on the trail?
I always have a plant book for sure. I always have a little vial for picking things up that's clear so I can see, so I can like capture it and look at it without hurting it, So we're kind of big on trying not to hurt stuff, Certainly the water is always a big thing. I'm already treated up on the clothing, and then some kind of eyepiece, because a lot of stuff we look at can be small.
Yeah.
If you're looking at lichens and things, you want to see, do they have these different features and all, So that's kind of nothing really that extraordinary, honestly.
Do you have snacks with you, or you?
Generally, once in a while, I
What are you
bring
snacking on out
something,
there?
I'm a pretty healthy guy. I like the nuts, things that give you energy to stay with you a long time.
Yeah.
I'm more like the peanuts or almond guy, and a fruit. Gotta stay healthy. Living out there, man, is not easy, right? I mean, you got to be able to haul rocks and logs, and the day I can't be physical is the day it's time I got to go.
You're hauling concrete on your shoulder.
You're hauling concrete on your shoulders. Yeah, it's a physical place to live. You really gotta be able to get her done.
So I know we have the Hewlett Center out there. We have the chalet. Are there saunas out there and ice baths after you're out there doing all this work? How are you recovering?
I sit on the front porch and watch the birds, and I love watching the birds. Pine warblers are currently coming right now, and they feed on our suet in our house, and we get to watch them right in front of us. I mean, nobody gets to see that. The bald eagle flies by in the evening. It's going to its nest. We have a nest on the preserve, and it just happens to fly right by the house like every evening. And so we get to see this. It's unbelievable. I'm not kidding about pinching myself. I mean, it's to be able to live there and wake up and experience that, or in the night, the stars.
Does it ever get old?
So beautiful. No, never gets old, because the eastern forest is endless. You'll never know it all, right? I mean, it's impossible. So there's always something new to see and learn, and there seems like there's always a new project that comes along we're working on, and it's fun.
Speaking of that, it's probably been 10 years at this point, but not too long ago, this research came out that wolf spiders were discovered at the edge, right?
Right.
What is a wolf spider?
Wolf spider is just a generic term for there's a group of spiders called the wolf spiders, and they tend to be ground, dweller guys, and they can get quite big, So there was
the size of your hand?
Not quite that big, maybe the size of your palm, inside of your palm, not your fingers, big enough, right? Yeah. So there was one in particular that lives in burrows, so they kind of use their chelicerae, their little jaws, to move dirt up out of this hole, and they'll dig these little burrows, and then they'll sew like a little grass skirt around the top so the water can't just flow in. But they only come out at night. And we have some that are more common. They live in our prairies, but there was one that had a certain colored, the fangs are a different color, the covering over the fang. So a researcher saw that and like, oh my gosh, that's this particular wolf spider. And name is escaping me right now, that hadn't been seen for like 50 years in Ohio.
I checked on this, and the spider was discovered in the edge of Appalachia Preserve in 2014. It was a Carolina wolf spider, scientific name Hogna carolinensis, and it is the largest of the wolf spiders in North America.
So it turned out to be a big deal, right? Because spiders are one of those things that
Yeah.
touches your inner soul, good or bad, right?
Right. Right.
So we got a Twitter, and I got more emails with blurry pictures of a spider on a screen. Like, is this that guy?
But
And then another guy called, and he's like, my grandma sent me out with a hoe in the garden, and I think I've killed some of those. I feel horrible.
you talk about this hard wire and this connection with these things. Some people see a snake and they're just so fascinated by it. Others are like me; they're terrified by it. But I think those ups and downs and that, like, you need those things that turn you in certain ways, and it's always something in nature. You see something that either terrifies you or just excites you in some kind of way that other things just can't do. And you being an artist, how much art is just inspired by nature. I mean, I remember in school once I learned how to. Trees always used to be just a stick with a little round top, like squiggly round top, and I learned in one art class, you draw all these V's, and that's where you get the branches and the twigs and stuff branching out. And sometimes I'll go outside and I'll just look up at the trees, and you see all the branches, and you think the best artist could not draw that, could not imagine and replicate something like that.
The art has followed me through my whole career. When I was at the museum doing special exhibits, we did birds in art, wildlife in art. We have a big wildlife art collection here at the museum, and so I mounted many shows in my early career of all the finest nature artists really in the world. Were in these exhibits. DeVere Burt was a big part of that. He still does that. We're going to be doing something in 2027. Art exhibit about the edge. DeVere and his team are going to come out and do some work based on the preserve and a little bit of Lucy Brown as well. So we're going to have going to push the art thing and actually have a show here at the terminal of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
People think of people like Audubon, John Ruthven, Charlie Harper, especially, well, I guess those are all bird guys, but it's just expansive. I mean, think of how many. I think if you pay attention, how much nature art you see in day to day and are so prevalent is really incredible. I mean, it continues to be a muse for people.
It's another way people connect, with the natural world. I mean, there's, like I said, it's an innate thing. I remember I went to Alaska once, and I was in Denali, and I was in this parking lot, and it was a sign that said something to the effect like, you might not want to go out into this wilderness out here and face what is living there, but humanity needs to be able to drive to the edge of these places to look in, to inform our soul, our connection to nature, So the edge is that as well. People can even just come out and, tour the roads and look at. You don't have to go out into it if you don't want. It touches the same buttons, in so many ways, just being in that kind of situation.
And that's part of what the Woods tries to do in the Children's Museum and the John A. and Judy Ruthven Get into Nature Gallery and the Science Museum. The Woods was built because kids weren't having this opportunity, or not everyone gets this opportunity to go out and climb in the trees and play in the woods and things like that. And we wanted to give them that experience, and the Get into Nature Gallery wanted to make that connection with the edge and the animals and stuff out there. So on the one hand, it can feel so far away, but those spaces exist nearby, and it is so humbling and rejuvenating to get out there and to just experience that. And I think every time people have that experience, they're reminded, and it's kind of this, why don't I do this more often? Type thing.
I know. And if you really look at where is the eastern forest ecosystem, well, it lay it right over Cincinnati. I mean, we're in it right now. You just don't happen to have as much. You're right. I mean, we've developed it. But there are pockets, as you suggest. So there's a lot of connection between Cincinnati and the edge. I mean, we have there's certain species that are, cosmopolitan, if you will, that you can see at the edge and see in your own backyard. You can really go down this rabbit hole of learning what's in your backyard and never come up for air. I mean, you think it's denuded, but it's not. There's a ton of life. You just have to find out what it does and where you find it, you
Right.
know, and how to look for it. It's timing is everything, you know.
Elizabeth Pierce, our beloved CEO, once I was looking at something and I said, I was trying to think what this is. I'll take a picture. I'll send it to Chris Beadle. She goes, there's apps that'll do that for you. And I go, but we have a Chris. Like we have these people. I mean, I was in Maine and I was looking at the coastline. I was like, why do the rocks all look this way? I'll take a picture. I'll send it to Brenda Hunter. She knows mineralogy. She
Yeah.
knows geology. It's a blast to work in an organization like this because we have people like you that we can ask questions to, that we can.
Right.
I mean, I had something in my yard once and I said, Chris, is this a weed? And you give me this long backstory. And it was amazing. You're not going to find that kind of stuff online. And I remember you said, if you break open one of those inns or one of those flowers, you'll see a bunch of ants come out. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go do this. And it's true. And
Yeah.
you're not going to Google that. You're not going to find that in something that comes from someone who lives it, who's out there, who's
I
experiencing
know,
it.
and that is something I struggle with because that is how people are exploring the eastern forest these days. I mean, hold your phone up and you got an app that'll just tell you every bird that's singing. It'll give you their name. It won't show you the bird, right?
Right.
But it'll tell you their name. You can hold up to a plant. It'll tell you the name. But I find that that's a piece of information, but if there's no connectivity to it, you're not going to remember it. If you're not looking it up in a book and, oh my gosh, there's the flower, I just found it in my book.
Yeah.
That just doing that one thing, it will stick in your mind. But the apps and things, it just doesn't stick in your head. You don't ever learn the bird call. The phone's doing it all for you, and then you never see the bird. So what's the point?
Right.
There's a disconnect with it. It's a great tool. I mean, these tools are amazing, but you really still either a person that to go to or yourself to take that next step and just bring a book and go on your own without your phone.
Well, that's what Mitch said. If you have an opportunity to go to the edge with Chris,
Mhm.
do it.
Yep.
And everyone knows what the Mona Lisa looks like, but people still go and they want to see it in person. So you can hear a bird call, you can see a picture of it on your phone, but seeing that in person is so exciting. I mean, that's why we exist as a museum too, because seeing the actual
Yeah.
thing with your own eyes is so much more meaningful and impactful.
And I'm passionate about it because I feel like what I've been gifted, this position that I work there and I live there and I get to learn all this stuff. I mean, it's like a PhD without going to school, and all this stuff in my head, I feel like, man, everybody should know this. We would have such a deeper respect, for our water and our water quality and just life in the forest. If you really knew how all this stuff functioned, it's mind-boggling, Cody.
Right.
It really is, and it's intriguing. I have do videos on our microscope, and I'll bring in a grandma to a 5-year-old and play these videos of these creatures and tell their story of how they live and function and communicate. And the people's jaws are on the ground. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
It's fascinating. You can't make this stuff up. It's so insanely interesting. But we don't see it. We've lost, we don't pass that down as much as we used to with our kids, and I remember my dental hygienist was saying, well, when I was a kid, we used to go out to ponds with my dad and we'd catch frogs and
Oh yeah.
there's no ponds around here anymore. I don't do that with my kids. Thinking, what? There's plenty of ponds around here. Why don't you go do that with your kid?
It's just not in the backyard.
I
But
know.
they're there. Yeah.
So getting out is critical.
So we've talked about the importance of these wild spaces to human life. We've talked about some of the threats that the natural world is facing. We've also talked about the power of the individual. What is something that people who are feeling some of that climate despair or, the despair of the destruction of the natural world, what is something that an average person can do to make things better?
That is a good question. It's such a loaded question in a way, because if you have land in Cincinnati, there's things you could do to better your land. Getting rid of, non-native things is critical. Mark Loba, who works in the always says, people, this or that about how things are bad, but go to their house and don't have a single native plant planted. Like, well, hello. I mean, you plant a native plant, you've got all these bees and butterflies that are connected to that. You may just see that, So, investing in native things at your house, because it's connected to this whole system where all these non-native horticultural things are problems because nothing feeds on them. They're not connected to the system in any fashion. So that's one thing. It's just really supporting native plants. Even if just in your yard is one, there's a columbine, I mean, you'll see a hummingbird on that thing because they've adapted to the life with that plant. I mean, so that's one critical thing, I think investing in native things and getting rid of things that aren't.
So when people come to the Edge, it's not just the beauty of the Edge and the experience that they're going to have there. They should also visit for the milkshakes, right?
The milkshake.
When I went to the Edge, you gave me a milkshake recommendation. Do you want to share that with everyone?
It was probably Blake's Pharmacy.
Yes.
Still
Yes.
the one of the few soda jerks left in the state. It's my pharmacy I go to. It's just so homespun, and lovely. And then in their little store, they have a little soda jerk thing where you can get a little, soda or a float, or a little pimento sandwich.
It's yes, because you
Or
are
do you get a pimento sandwich anymore, Cody?
you're out there and you're out there on the trails and you're hiking and you're doing this and stuff and you get a little hungry and it's again, this is not it's not down the road from Gatlinburg
Right.
and Pigeon Forge, which I think a lot of people have experience with and stuff. So I mean, after you're out there for a day, or I think when I was out there, we ended up getting caught in the rain. Pimento sandwich, it just hits. And then the milkshake, it was awesome.
Yeah, and then if you exit the building there and walk 2 or 3 buildings up, and then there is the Buzzard Roof mural that my wife and I painted.
Really?
In the middle of downtown is this ginormous painting. It's 20 by 60 some feet. It's Buzzard Roost Rock. It's dedicated to E. Lucy Brown, who started the preserve, started the Nature Conservancy, very instrumental at the preserve. So I dedicated it to her. So my wife and I painted this. It's beautiful. We just did a whole restoration on it, repainted the whole thing, resealed the whole thing. So right in the middle of downtown West Union, right across from the courthouse, is our preserve on the wall.
When
That's
did you
awesome.
originally paint that?
It was like 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so we, the Arts Council got some money, wanted to do a mural, and approached my wife and I. That was an undertaking. I literally lost 10 pounds. We had to paint at night because it was in between a bank and a lawyer's office, so we had to only go in the dark. So, painting at night, all night long. I'd get home at 4 in the morning. I lost 10 pounds climbing, ladders and scaffolds, and I mean, it was insane.
That's
I'll never
incredible.
do it again, I can tell you that.
I was going to ask how many other murals have you done, but that was
I will never do it again.
one is enough.
It was a lot of work, but it's really cool. So people will hike the trail and they'll go to Blake's and get a pimento sandwich, and then walk a couple of feet up, and there's the Buzzard Roost mural right there, and they'll take a picture of themselves with it because it's huge. It's so colorful. My wife's she just retired from Xavier as an art professor, so she's a color theorist. I mean, she knows color. It'll just take your breath away. It's so beautiful.
You can go to West Union, you get the full Chris Beadle experience.
You get the whole Chris
in
Beadle
a single
experience
street.
in town, and then you go out.
We ask everyone this, for better or worse, if you had a walk-up song, like baseball players when they go to the plate, they have a walk-up song. What would your walk-up song be?
Oh, jeepers. That's a really good question.
I'm trying to think of what might be on theme or on brand for that.
Yeah, that one. That take a minute to chew on that one.
I'm trying to think. There's got to be like some bluegrass song or something that's really appropriate, really fitting. I just can't think of what that might be.
I don't know. I'm thinking more along the lines of like Jack White or
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's,
hard hitting, let's get on it kind
Yeah.
of thing. Let's give me some energy.
You're gonna be out there. You're gonna be elbow deep in raccoon scat, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's the song.
I know. I'll send it to you when I think about it for sure.
And I don't think you would, but if you could trade roles with anyone in the museum for a day, who would you trade roles with? And then I have a flip to this question too.
Jeepers. Well, I'd have to probably stay, provincial at the edge. It'd be Mark Zloba who works for me. He doesn't have to do all the, administrative talking head things. He gets to go out in the land and track rattlesnakes and all that good stuff. So it'd be Mark.
Yeah, you'd shove a lot of those administrative duties off.
Right.
Well, you kind of answered the other part was if you could put anyone in your role for a day, either just for them to experience what you do or kind of maybe as gentle punishment, who might that be?
Wow. I think it'd have to be either like Elizabeth or Whitney because Whitney Owens because they both obviously are my supers in a way, right? But them to see and live that every day out there. I mean, we report on it, but it's not quite the same,
Mhm.
when you're like living it.
Yeah.
like your driveway's getting washed away by torrential rain, and knowing you got to do something about it or dig a
Yeah.
ditch out with a shovel. I mean, it's just things that you can't escape. So I think just to be there for even a week, you would just sort of get a picture of like this job is all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fair because I mean, everything you talked about, it's so hard to put into words. It's hard to just say here's what's normal about it because everything's extraordinary.
Yeah, it kind of, you take it as it comes in so many ways. When you have that much land, right? You got utilities and all those things to deal with, and facilities. It's a bit of a promotion, fundraising, exhibitry type of things. I mean, we kind of do it all. I always like to say, like, all the jobs in the museum center, I do them all.
Yeah.
As one person. I don't do them all really well, but, I do them all. And so, because you're out there, you kind of have to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Or you're in trouble. There's not much connectivity, I don't have a smartphone or any of that kind of bit, It's pretty much mono-y woodzo,
To you, it sounds like the dream.
Oh, it's a dream come true. I mean, it's unbelievable. I
40
thank
years.
DeVere Burt for hiring me, Sandy Shipley initially for hiring me. I mean, those two people, changed the trajectory of my entire life, without a doubt.
That's amazing. Well, Chris, this has been awesome, and I hope that everyone listening checks out the Edge, even if you just want to at least look at pictures, understand what is out there, what we're talking about, but just take the drive. It's a perfect way to get out there and just to reconnect and to experience this. So, Chris, thanks for spending some time with us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Remember, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe. But most importantly, come check it out for yourself. Visit cincimuseum.org to see the latest reasons to visit and to learn about the Edge, get directions, get trail maps, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, comments for us, for Chris, if you have a weird plant in your yard and you don't know what it is, email us at meanwhile@cincimuseum.org. We'll get with Chris. We'll figure it out. We'll get the answer for you. Most importantly, thanks for listening.